Hello, everybody. All right, just testing to make sure everything's all right. All right, can you guys hear me? All right, perfect. Let me make sure I have everything ready. Looks like we start in about 2 minutes, so I'm just going to get everything all set up. Okay, let's make sure I have everything all set up. And then we will be... All right, I guess before we get started, just curious, who else is also from Orlando? It's if you guys are living in Orlando, you know it's raining right now. So if for some reason my audio doesn't come out clear or I have some connection issues on my side because it looks like a thunderstorm is about to roll in, I'm going to try to be recording this separately from my end, and I'll upload this panel to my YouTube channel in case anything goes wrong. If not, I'm going to try to do this the best I can, despite the weather. And the presentation portion of the panel, I think, will take up about 2/3 of the entire time. Afterwards, I'll be open for questions. And if you have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat, and I will categorize them so I could answer them towards the end. And to get started, I guess I'll just link my social media information in case you want to get in touch with me afterwards. All right. So that should be all my social media information in case you want to follow me afterwards. Or if you want to get in contact with me with more questions. And with that, it looks like it is 6:30, so we will begin. Welcome, everybody, to the So You Want to Be a Con Artist panel. This is a panel I've been doing for about, probably over 5 years now. I've been doing this panel at a bunch of different cons. I do this panel about 10 to 15 times a year at different conventions. So not just furry cons, but at anime cons, comic cons, and pony cons. So this is a panel that I've been doing for a while. It's slowly been evolving as I've been branching out more and more to different types of cons. I'm currently doing conventions full-time. It's my full-time income and profession. Of course, considering the situations we are in right now with COVID and everything else that's happening, most of us vendors have to shift to an online method. So with that comes online conventions. So I have presented this version at various online conventions. We talked about the I guess, the situation of what's happening with the pandemic. So if you want to see those versions, I think I have the versions done for some past events on the YouTube channel. But with this one, I kind of want to, I don't want to go back into that direction, but I want to look at how the nature of con vending as we've known for the past decade, because anything I tell you with this panel might change in the future, considering how the situation is right now. When we do come back to cons, in-person cons, they might be changed dramatically. So some of the vending advice I might be able to give you might not be up to date anymore. But I guess from our experience, I'll give you the best I can with what's going on. So to begin, first off, let's see if the slideshows are working. Here we go. Like I said, you guys might know me in the fandom as an Animorphs. I do a lot of transformation themed artwork. You guys might also know me for my con history panels. I do a bunch of convention history stuff. I'm working on the history book on the nature and evolution of fan cons in the United States. In fact, I'm doing the con history panel in about an hour after this panel is done. So if you guys are interested, stay tuned for that. If you guys are from the pony side of things, you might know me for my tarot cards and pins under the name Chocolate Pony. My overall account that you can follow me at is Transformative. It's on Twitter. I'm also just starting up a YouTube channel. It's a brand new YouTube channel. Only have one video up there so far. But it's also at Transformative, and that's where I'll be posting a lot of new videos on different topics I like talking about. And a brand new store. I just opened it half an hour ago. I don't have if you guys know me, I don't have an online store. I mostly do all my sales at person in con, which has been affected with how things are going on. So I've been forced to kind of shift to an online store. So I do have an online store last minute. It's at conhistory.com/shop. That's also where you could get all the updates on my con history book. All right. And like I'm saying, I'm doing a con history panel later tonight, so stick around for that. And tomorrow I'll be doing the inanimate transformation panel. So if you guys are interested in the nature of inanimate transformation, it's going to be a little more niche than the other transformation panels and meetups you might be seeing at this con, because mine specifically focus. But if you guys are interested in that, make sure to check that out for tomorrow night. All right. So let's start off with my background with Megaplex. So I actually just moved to Orlando last December. So Megaplex is now my local furry con. I vended at my very first Megaplex. Last Megaplex was my very first Megaplex I vended at, and you guys might recognize my table. My table was near the front. I had all the flags. You guys might recognize that Tadano flag. Actually, I finally have it back on stock. It's for sale in the con store. So what's interesting was I did my very first Megaplex after I did BronyCon, which is to date the largest convention I vended at. So it kind of shows the vast size difference between these two different cons. And I'm going to talk about how, as an artist and as a vendor, I try to adapt my booth and my products to the different size cons, the different size booths that I have to make up with. So with that, so you guys might recognize some of the pins that I've had at some cons. The alligator pin, which was a special pin I made for Megaplex last year. It's also back in stock. It's on the con store on the website if you're interested in checking it out. I also have my tarot cards, which are very popular, available as well. So let's begin with talking about the first steps you might need to take if you are an artist and looking into vending. So when I do this panel, it's to teach people how to vend better at cons. So this is not an art panel teaching you how to draw or how to make products. It's more, you're an artist, you have some product ideas, you just need a place you need to know how to sell or showcase them. So this panel already assumes that you do have some art talent, that you want to just take a step forward and try to make con vending a full-time career, or at least a part-time thing, interested in getting into con vending. So I'm going to break down my experiences doing this full-time for the last decade or so, and tie in some of my background educational experiences. So if you guys don't know, I was a I studied genetic biology at Johns Hopkins University, so I was able to learn a bit more about the insights on human psychology and how the human mind likes to think, and that's what I've used to apply for how I like to structure my booths. So I'm going to break down this panel into, I would say, about four specific areas. First is getting started with vending at cons, applying for conventions, how to make yourself stand out, and my favorite part, the psychology behind the display and how to set up your display. So just to begin, whether you are vending as just a side gig or something you just like doing for fun, understand that you'll be treating this as a secondary job. If not a full-time job, this is basically going to be a secondary job for you. So you have to treat it as such. You're going to have to be your own boss. You have to keep up to date with everything. And actually, I should check beforehand, but everyone who's in the chat, can you see the screen? I'm showing PowerPoints. If my PowerPoints are not showing, that would be very weird, but hopefully my PowerPoints are showing, since I'll have display examples on there. But if you, so if you guys are interested, I will probably have all these slides on, I'll put all these slides on Google Slides so you can look at them afterwards. But yeah, so understand that this will be a full-time job for you. So you're going to need to have an area of your house dedicated for your vending space. So you might see some fursuit makers, for example, have a room of their house dedicated to just vending setup and everything like that. Same for myself. I have an area of my house. So the previous place I was living in Tallahassee, I rented out 2 bedrooms. The second bedroom was completely for con vending. So this is where I'll keep my luggage, my displays, my racks, everything, as well as all my inventory. Now, here's the good thing about this. If you are doing this as a job, you can write off that portion of your rent if you are renting a house or an apartment and you're using an area that's 100% dedicated to con vending. That is part of your business, and as such, you can write it off as a tax expense. Now, it has to be used 100% for your vending job. So, for example, I can't write off my living room because my living room also has TV and other entertainment stuff there. Even though I do keep some con inventory there, I can't write that off as a business expense. But because I do have a second room and I also have my closet that's dedicated to my vending stuff, I'm able to write that off as a tax expense. So just realize you're going to have a lot of space dedicated for this. Next thing you're going to realize is you're going to need to keep a track of a lot of stuff. So these are examples of my notebook. So I found ever since vending at cons, I no longer have time. Like my sketchbooks have ended up being filled with inventory lists as opposed to drawings, because you really have to keep type inventory, especially you need to know what sells, what's sold, and what you need to restock on. So just realize it's going to be a little bit hectic, especially when you're starting out to learn to inventory and get everything all started. Now, assuming you are new and haven't vended at a con before or still trying to break into the structure, the next important recommendation I could give you is networking with other artists and vendors. So I guess since we do have a live audience here, I normally, when I'm at con, I ask for a show of hands who here has vended before. So if you've vended before, say yes. If you haven't, say no. If you are interested in vending, say I want to vend. So I can get a feel for everyone out there and their current status. Now, when I started out vending, I didn't really know what to do. So if I could give recommendations to myself recommendations. Okay. We have someone who said he invented a Native American powwows. That sounds interesting. Yeah, so actually, if you have vended at something like that, so some people have also started off at like vending at like street fairs or trade shows. They're all very, very different animals, and I'll explain that a bit. But assuming you are since this is like FurryCon, I'm assuming all of you guys are who are interested in vending are furry artists. You know there is a community of furry artists out there, and it might seem a little intimidating to get to know. But if you're able to, try to join Artist Alley groups and chat. There's a lot of groups on Facebook, for example. Artist Alley International is one that I use, and it's great because there's a lot of networking. So let's say you want to get lanyards made because you have some great idea for lanyards, but you never did lanyards before. In these large groups, someone might say, hey, I'm doing a group order for lanyards. If you want to join in, we could save on the cost of the lanyards. That's a great way to get started. Some people don't want to tell you the company where to get things from, but if you partner with them, it saves you money anyways. You could do a little bit of research yourself. I think in the Pony fandom, we have a Discord group where we also share information. So doesn't matter where you're active. If you're active on Telegram, Facebook, or Discord, there is going to be some groups where you could start vending and meeting different artists. Artist Alley International is a Facebook group, so you have to find it on Facebook. Sorry. Yeah, so you don't have to go to that one. That's just one I recommended, and it's more focused on anime cons. I'm sure there's furry equivalents. I actually haven't. I don't think I'm in. I think Corgi Events has a group. I'm not too sure, but the reason why I'm saying partner up is because if you're a first-time vendor, you never vended before. All of a sudden you have your new table. You don't know what to do. You don't know what to display. You don't know how to make sales. So if you could find a friend who is willing to share half a table or at least a small portion of their table, even if they don't have space for you to vend, if you could sit with them for at least a few cons and see how they make sales, see how they interact with customers, that is a great way for you to get started, because you might start picking up on why they do things they do. Why do they build the display the way they do? Why do they have certain items in certain locations? See how they do inventory, see how they make sales. So just if I could recommend for your first vending experience, try to at least share a table with someone so you could see how they do things, and it will be better for helping you. All right. Okay. So this is actually I've done this panel at a few different online cons. This is my first time using this system. So for some reason, the comments are not updating for me. I am able to read the comments. I have to scroll down for some reason. It doesn't just pop up. So if I don't see your comments, I apologize for that. But I will have a time at the end where I'll make sure to read everyone's questions and try to answer as many as I can. All right. So let's go to the next one. So researching the types of cons that you are interested in. I'm assuming that you are you guys are furry artists, so you're going to try to do furry cons. But if you have different types of things, vend at cons that are more suited to your strength. So, for example, if you have original art, Comic Cons are the best for that, especially if you have your own original like web comic or a fanzine or your own mini comic. Comic Cons are perfect for that, because for the most part, Comic Cons do not allow fan art. So they're more focused on original content. So if you have original stuff and don't want to compete with people who draw Danny Phantom fan art or Pokemon fan art, then Comic Cons would be a great place to get started. Anime cons, if you're a fan artist, like if you like drawing Zootopia stuff or Pokemon, anime cons are built around the concept of fan art. So that would be a great place for you. Now, if you want to do on-site commissions, now you probably know that furry cons are especially great for on-site commissions, especially with the Artist Alley. FurryCon Artist Alleys have a unique structure where it's easier to do. So I'm going to explain it later in breaking down the types of applications, but FurryCons have a daily. Sometimes it's called a daily lottery Artist Alley. Most FurryCons, they break down their Artist Alley by day, and there's either an at-con lottery or a pre-con lottery that determines which table you get and for which spot. And it's normally half a table, so all you need is just a sketchbook and your pencil, and you're good to go. So if you don't want to have a giant big display like I do, where it takes like 5 hours to build, and I have to have all this dedicated space. If you just want to bring your backpack, your sketchbook, and your pencil, that's all you need for the FurryCon artist alleys. If not, then you upgrade yourself to a dealer's den. And then for science fiction cons, if you have like limited artwork, so if you're not someone who wants to mass produce prints, if you have like a few nice paintings that you've done, science fiction cons are known for the artist alleys, artist auctions, which they really started, the art show. And since furry cons descended from science fiction cons, a lot of furry cons that do continue tradition also have an art show where you could display stuff. Now, the important things with this is make sure to know the rights for vending. So fan art is a big tricky issue. There are some companies that crack down on this. Nintendo famously cracks down on a lot of stuff. Disney sometimes cracks down on things. I know Gressico is something that's kind of off limits. You can't really do stuff with Gressico. So if they found you, you normally have to take your stuff down. So just make sure to know the laws if you want to do fan art. Know the laws of the state, because each state is going to have a different state tax. They might require different types of licenses. So some states like Texas require you to have just a default sales permit that you have to renew every single year, while some states like California want you to have a temporary sales permit where you apply for a set amount of time. So again, make sure to know the stuff, and then I'm going to talk about this later, but know the restrictions when it comes to tabling and the booths. So like I said, I've been doing the history of convention for a long time now. I've been working on different conventions. So this actually helps me a lot for vending stuff, because going to all these different types of cons, I could see where they fall and what type of crowds and audience they attract. So I know people, when they start vending at cons, they try to find all the cons across the country that are open and try to apply for them. And if you're getting started for your first year, I say don't even worry about hitting the national circuit. Just focus on your local area, because every single local major metropolitan area would have a similar set of conventions. So you normally always have at least one furry con within your Metroplex in that area. You most likely have a Comic-Con and Anime Con. So breaking down three specific areas, Dallas, Chicago, and Atlanta, for example, you see that at least with Dallas and Chicago, they both have PonyCons at very similar sizes. And also, yeah, you'll notice that the size difference between cons. So PonyCons on average are smaller. So PonyCons, TrekCons, and fan-specific cons are going to be smaller, around the 1,000 mark. Furry cons, actually, this should probably be updated. It says a lot of furry cons are hitting higher numbers, but most furry cons are going to be about 1,000 to about 5,000 attendees. Anime cons are normally in the 10,000 to 30,000 attendees, and then multi-genre cons, which are basically what Comic Cons have evolved to today, are going to be much, much higher. And I think I'm reading in the chat right now that people are talking about some anxiety with interacting with people. So if you do have fear of crowds and stuff, maybe try to stick with the smaller cons first before you go to the bigger cons. But each major area should at least have one furry con, one anime con, one multimedia con, and they all, if you notice, they all fall within very, very similar number ranges. So the furry cons are roughly in the 4,000s. The anime cons are roughly in the 30,000s, and then the large multimedia cons are roughly in the 70,000s. All right, so here's something that I thought as an artist vending for almost a decade now, I thought I mastered. But this is something that still stresses me out time and time again, and it's not the fault of any one con, because all cons have different issues which prevent them from really being clear with the application system. But it's funny, because I thought if I vend at cons enough times, I will get to the point where I don't even have to really stress with applications too much, that people will say, oh, we want you at the con, here's your table, we invite you as a guest, and good. And I've been invited as a guest of honor or a community guest to a lot of cons, and a lot of cons have invited me, asked me to vend at their cons. But even the cons that ask me to come to their cons also sometimes mess up their application process. So, for example, there's a furry con in the Pacific Northwest. The con chair personally called me on the phone, asked me to vend at their con, and then like they ended up kind of messing up on their part, for example. So even cons where I'm personally invited as like a guest or as a vendor, still kind of are not as clear cut with these things. But to simplify things, there are three major types of application system most cons use. They are called the jury and vetted system, the first come first serve, and the lottery system. Now, I want to give you guys a little bit of advice on how to apply to each of these three types of cons. As I said, even with all my years of experience doing these cons, I've done at least 100 cons under my belt, vending at this point. I'm still always being tricked up by these different systems. So let's try to go through each of them and give you guys some tips for how to get started. Now, as I was talking about the history of conventions, most cons, when they started off with the jury or vetted system. So this is the very, very simple method. So it's the Comic Cons that really got started with what's now known as the Artist Alley. And Comic Cons normally want people who are pro and in the industry to get tables because they want name recognition. So most Comic Cons, when they got started, would use something called a jury method, where you have a group of volunteers go through each application and then they vet you. Now, to prepare for these, normally you have to have a very, very strong portfolio. So as opposed to the other two systems, I would say don't rush it right away. Make sure you know what they are wanting and make sure you have a strong portfolio when you apply. Get everything ready and good to go. Now, so the best way you could do this is try to apply year after year, and then eventually you'll hit the magic ticket and get in. Some cons with juried system, like I think ACON and BLFC, they want to alternate. So if you got accepted the previous year, they probably won't have you back the following year because they want to diversify and make sure everyone gets a chance. The issues with this method specifically is when the 90s came about and then the 2000s and everyone started trying to apply for conventions, there ended up not being enough volunteer staff, because remember, a lot of these cons are run by volunteer staff. There's not enough volunteer staff to review thousands and thousands of portfolios. So a lot of these cons couldn't really function that way. The issues with a lot of jury and vetted system is it could lead to favoritism and nepotism. So, and I know this is a tricky one because I at some cons I'm friends with the staff, and I really hope it doesn't affect him. It does. It's not what got me the table, but I do understand at some cons, staff are going to prefer friends over people they don't know, and that becomes very, very tricky. I think Megaplex is famous for this, and then I'm also friends with a lot of people who run Megaplex, but I know within my artist friends who apply for Megaplex, the person who runs their artist alley and dealers normally always picks her same select group of friends. So that kind of becomes an issue. And also, if you for some reason get on the bad side of staff and that specific staffer is doing the selection for that year you apply and they just don't like you, they might just not accept your application. Some artists know this as shadow banning, where you're not officially banned by the con, but just the person who's doing the vendor selection just doesn't like you and they won't accept you. So juried system, I would say out of all of them, it's probably the best, but it's also the most unfair depending on which side of the situation you're on. Yeah, so it's not that fun. So the next one is it's the first come first serve system. So like I was saying, when all these cons in the 90s started being overwhelmed by all the applications, they shifted. I think it was specifically the anime cons that shifted to what's called the first come first serve. Now, in the 90s and early 2000s, when a lot of these applications were done by the snail mail, or it was done on very, very slow internet connections, this worked. because they would assume that the most dedicated artists who really wanted the space and really wanted to vend will apply within the first 2 weeks of opening. And that's normally fine. But in this day and age where everyone has access to the internet on their phone, on their laptop, and everyone is applying the very second applications open, it doesn't really become the best. And and it's not a fault of a lot of cons. In fact, most cons, Megaplex, for example. Actually, yeah, since this is a Megaplex con, again, I love Megaplex. It's my local con. I love all the staffers. Megaplex is a con, for example, that does a first come, first serve system. So is Furry Fiesta. And let me explain why it doesn't really work. So I'm going to use Anime Expo as an example. So Anime Expo is the largest anime con in the United States. They have a first come, first serve system. I've been trying to apply for Anime Expo for 9 years now. Guess how many times I got in? And remember, each of these 9 times, I applied the very second Anime Expo applications opened. Out of the 9 years I've been trying it, I got into Anime Expo exactly 0 times. Okay, so 0 times. So to give an example, here is my application for this year's Anime Expo. So, let me first talk about the tips. How I normally, this is how I would normally recommend someone get into the first come first system. So, some cons like Furry Fiesta will have a practice application, so you know exactly what to have filled in when it opens. So, for example, Furry Fiesta, they do have a practice application. When I started the practice application, it took me about 2 minutes to type in all the information. After a week of practicing, I could type all my information in about 45 seconds. Now, it's odd because as an artist, I assumed I should be chosen based on at least my experience. So the fact that as an artist, instead of trying to focusing on new products or trying to make my portfolio look nicer, I have to focus on trying to type as fast as I can. You can see it's not the best system. So I come from the medical background, and I was thinking how if this applied to the medical field. Imagine doctors being chosen for surgery based on how fast they could type or who's the first doctor to run through the surgery room. So my recommendations is have at least, if you know the information, have it pre-filled. Also, if you can have an autofill system, do that as well. So Google autofill is really good, and make use of atomic clocks. So because when they say it opens at, let's say, 8 p.m., for example, it opens at 8 p.m. So if you are like 1 or 2 seconds late, it's it's not going to work. It's really dependent on speed and typing abilities, and I hate to say it's kind of ableist, because if you're an older person, you're a person who hands don't work as well, you might not able to get in. So for Anime Expo, I had all these windows open automatically and refresh on the second as 11:59 shifted to 12. And within the 20 seconds of this, you could see the red tabs are all things that said I applied too early. I refreshed the window too early. The yellow were the 2 where it was not available. And then the last 4 or 5 tabs in orange is, oh, I'm too late. All these applications are already filled up. So you could see, even doing all this, I still didn't do this. And this is my story year after year. And some years it hurts me. So for example, 1 year I couldn't even apply because I was flying from one con to another. And because I was flying, I was on the plane with no internet, I couldn't apply for the con. And when I emailed them, hey, I've been trying to do this for years and I'm flying during the time your application's open, is there anything you can do? It's like, sorry, tough luck. And for a con like Anime Expo, the largest anime con in the United States, they can do this because doesn't matter how many people complain about their system, they will have a pool of artists they could pull from. They will never be short of artists. And this is why it's sad that a lot of us artists and vendors are kind of treated like secondary folks, because we are the people that really make up the convention. Like, people do come for the guests and panels, but they also come for the artists. So the fact that they're making these systems hard is kind of really bad. And I think same as Megaplex as well. I think last year for Megaplex, I applied 4 hours after it opened, applications opened, and I was able to get a table. This year for Megaplex, I actually I was actually vending at a con in Canada. I shut down my booth early. I ran up to my hotel room right away. And then I had my friend on another computer using a separate internet connection just in case. And then once Megaplex's applications opened, I typed in my application as fast as possible. I sent it in. I think I sent everything in under like 6 minutes, and I didn't get a table for Megaplex. And so there we go. So most cons have then shifted to the next system, which is started in 2000. It's called a lottery system. Now, again, also it's purely based on luck, so your experience doesn't matter, but so it's now luck based. It's still tricky and it's still unfair because, for example, but it's considered the great equalizer. So a young artist who does Danny Phantom fan art, for example, is now on the same stature as someone who works on the official Spider-Man comic. So it does kind of give equal footing to everybody. But again, it might not be fair. So, for example, let's do Otakon. Otakon is an anime con that uses a lottery system. Of the 10 years I applied for Otakon, I only got a table from their lottery system twice. So, again, it's not the best. Now, for the lottery system, my tips are, if they allow it, because some cons will ban you if you do this, but if they allow you to apply as an individual and as a studio do it, that means you have 2 extra applications under your belt. So studios are normally a group of artists that allow you to vend as a group, but also as an individual. So if you could do that, try it. So because all 3 systems are not the best, most cons have shifted to hybrid system. As someone in the chat just said, yep, some cons have shifted to hybrid systems. So Furry Fiesta, for example, has the first part is a first come, first serve. So I think half the tables are first come, first serve, and the other half is a lottery system. Again, that one's tricky as well. Like, I don't think I've ever gotten into Furry Fiesta when I ended up being in the lottery. It's only first come, first serve. So yeah, just because I could go on for this for ages, just know that the systems for applying for cons, they're going to cause you a lot of stress. Even when you're as prepared for them like I do. Like I said, this is my full-time job. I have to vend at cons to make money. And the fact that even though my job is dependent on this, the fact that everything comes down to luck or internet speed in the end is kind of very sad, and it still causes me a lot of stress and frustration, because just imagine like you being able to go to work only based on these systems. So these are tips I could give you for this, but don't let that get you down. If you can, if the con allows you to, try to partner with a friend. Sometimes, for example, I've been a guest of honor at some cons, and I wasn't able to get a table initially, but because I was asked to be a guest, they were able to get you a table. So if you can't get in the normal way, maybe offer to do some panels for them. If you could do a few panels, maybe they'll compensate you back by giving you a table. So yeah, so these are tricks. So these are things you could do. The next part also plays into this is planning. You got your con. Now you got accepted to the con. You got the space. So how are you going to plan to travel? Now, this is where I talk about local cons versus long distance cons, because your costs, now remember, this is going to eat up into your costs. If you could do a con that's in your city, you don't really have to pay for housing, for the hotel, for transportation. You could just travel, but you might need to start going to long distance cons. So, for example, before I moved to Orlando, I was living in Tallahassee, and there's basically no conventions in Tallahassee. So I have to do all these cons by traveling all across the country for these cons. So how am I supposed to calculate this? Well, there's a lot of things you have to do. So first of all, you have to divide it based on how much you can travel with versus cost. So this is I think it's a formula I've developed. I call it the cost of travel versus the amount of luggage. So if you are someone who's trying to, so basically here's the correlation. If you want to bring more stuff with you, your travel costs are going to be a lot more expensive. If you want to travel cheap, you aren't going to be able to bring as much stuff with you. So let's break down all these different travel types. So when I was living in Austin, Texas, I would be able to still do, Austin doesn't have a furry con, for example, but they have but Texas Furry Fiestas in Dallas. So I had a few options. Traveling from Austin to Dallas is about a 3-hour car ride. And these were my options. First, I could take the bus. So for the bus, it could be a Megabus, it could be a Greyhound, any type of bus. Most of these buses that run city to city within state normally are about $5 to $20. The only issue is most of these buses only allow you one carry-on bag, and it's not even the airplane size carry-on bag. It's normally a backpack. And if you want to bring a larger luggage, it costs normally like $20 to $50 more, and it might not even be worth it at that price. So I rarely took the bus because of these restrictions. If you guys see my booth, there's no way to carry all that stuff in my backpack. Now, the next option for me was train. When I was living in Austin, yes, I sometimes took the Amtrak to the different cons in the area. When I was living in Maryland, I would also do the same thing. I would use the Amtrak. Now, most train tickets cost about $20 to $50. They will allow you to have one carry-on bag and one check-in bag, and this check-in bag is normally the airline size bag, so you can carry a little bit more. Now, if you need to bring more like me, you might have to start taking a plane. So there got to a point when I was living in Austin where, yes, I could travel for cheaper to Dallas using a train or a bus, but because I had so much stuff for my booth, there is no way I could keep it within these two bags. So I ended up having to pay for a plane ticket to fly those 3 hours from Austin to Dallas because I was able to bring more bags in. So I used to use Southwest. Southwest gives you 2 check-in bags for free, which is really, really great, especially if you have a lot of stuff. I'm currently using Delta. I was able to get the Delta use Delta enough that I'm a Delta Platinum Medallion member now, and because of that, I get 3 free bags. But if you could use an airline that gives you free bags, do that. And yeah, so it was more expensive, but I was able to bring more. Now, I don't have a car, but if you have a car, that would have been the best option for me, is to drive from Austin to Dallas. Now, here's the issue with the cars, because depending on how long your trip is going to be, you have to start worrying about hotels along the way. You have to worry about the cost of gas. Long distance trips are going to put damage on your car. So there's a lot of factors that sometimes, even though cars can carry a lot more than the previous 3 options, there's a lot of wear and tear and extra costs that come with your car. And then if you're a really big vendor, I think someone who's a big fursuit maker, for example, might have to do this. You use a truck or van. That's going to be a lot more. Now, like I said, each of these sizes outweighs costs and benefits. So here's the tricks for saving. If you could ship to the Cons hotel, do that. Most hotels will charge you probably $5 to $10 based on packages. Sometimes they charge you on weight. Sometimes some hotels don't even charge you anything. So there have been cons where I was able to ship to the hotel, and the hotel didn't even charge me for anything. One thing I would not recommend is not ship to the convention center. Normally, shipping to the convention center is much more expensive, so avoid that if possible. But if you can ship to the hotel, that will save you on cost. Also, keep in mind that, like I was saying beforehand with the room, travel is a business write-off. So if you're making money from these cons, you can write off the cost of your airline ticket, for example, or the cost of your gas. Now, it's better just to most people try to save gas tickets and stuff. I think it's better for you to do something called per diem, where I think they will estimate it based on miles instead of you having to save your receipts. Now, after your first few times vending, you're going to start realizing that some things are selling better than other things. So after my first few cons, I noticed that some items started making me more of my sales. Like, for example, my tarot cards and my card games and badges were making me a lot more of my sales than my other items. And I think this is like my 3rd BronyCon, for example. And you can see prints made up only a tiny sliver of my sale. Now, if you guys know, prints take up a lot of space at your booth. They take up, not only do they take up a lot of space, prints are very heavy. So traveling with prints is very, very heavy, and also they take up a lot of space. So because of that, once I realized prints were making me like probably only 1% of my sale, I cut them out. Now, there's a chance I could be losing potential sales from not doing these prints. But because I was able to cut it out, I was able to focus on the other items that sold me more money. And you'll start seeing that. You'll start seeing some items are making you a lot more money, since like most people, when they start vending, they try to do the same thing. Everyone tries to do lanyards, buttons, pins, prints. But once you realize that a few of your items are making you more money than the others, you could start cutting out those items and focusing on your big ticket items. So here's a good example. So for example, these are 3 different size pony conventions I went to in 2018. Mid-size convention, BabsCon, FFV, which is a larger size pony convention, and Crystal Fair, which is a small size pony convention. Now, I made different sales on different items at each of these 3 events, but you notice my top 5 items all netted me about 75% of my sales. So even though I sold different amounts of the tarot cards, which are in blue here, combined with the other 4 items, they made me about 75% of my overall sales. So you start noticing trends like that a lot of things are making you more money, and you should focus on those. And then the things that are not making you as much, you might be able to safely weed out. Now, like I said, a lot of people do prints, a lot of people do pins, a lot of people do print. So how are you supposed to make yourself stand out when everyone else is doing this? Like, everyone's doing wall scrolls, everyone's doing gotchis. How do you make yourself stand out? Now, one thing I recommend is have start shifting to a signature item. Once you realize some things are making you more money, maybe try to focus on that. So have a signature item that stands out, that you're known for. So for example, in the pony and anime and comic fandom, I'm known for my tarot cards and my tarot decks. So people know me for my tarot stuff. In the furry fandoms, people know me for a lot of my transformation themed stuff. That's what makes me stand out, makes me unique from other people. If you have a unique art style, really focus on your art style. If it's good, then it'll make your stuff stand out as opposed to other people. Or if you're still doing the same things that everyone else is doing, like prints and buttons, give them unique twists. So for example, if you, instead of just doing normal prints, if you made prints that are like holographic, for example, they're going to stand out from everyone else's prints. If you put googly eyes on your button, for example, your buttons are going to stand out from other people. And also make sure to have a balance. If you are doing fan art, make sure to have a balance between your original content and fan art, because you want to start shifting to your own original stuff instead of relying on fan art, so you can start promoting yourself as an artist and some projects that you're doing. So example, if you are working on your own webcomic or comic book, focus on trying to push that. Even though maybe you can have fan art attract people to your booth, but try to push them towards some of your more original projects. That's a great way to really expand your audience. So like I was saying, within the pony fandom, for example, I'm known for the tarot cards. These are things that got me popular. In the furry fandom, people started knowing me for my flags. So you might have seen my flags at a lot of furry cons. So you're going to start finding items that make you stand out. So for example, since I was known for the tarot cards in the pony fandom and anime fandom, I started doing my own unique new tarot cards for the furry conventions. I just got these in stock, so these are available on my store for resale, for sale. So once you are known for something, try to expand and diversify it. So instead of just having one tarot deck, I tried to make a bunch of different tarot decks, so I could attract a wide range of people. Experiment too. So before acrylic charm standees became really big, I think I was one of the first to try to do the acrylic standees. And actually these weren't as, even though a lot of people saw these on Twitter and really liked them, they actually didn't make me a lot of money. But that's the risk you're going to have to take. You have to, if you want to experiment with new things. So for example, this was an item that I was really proud of. But it was probably the most expensive thing, because I had to make and buy these bags separately and then add an acrylic shell as a charm. I thought these were a cute idea, but yeah, they didn't make me a lot of money. So you're going to find these things a lot, that experiment, take risks with new merchandise ideas. Even if they don't make you as much as you were hoping, still just give it a shot. Now, this is actually my favorite part of the panel to discuss. It's booth setup. It's a lot of stuff I like about setting up booths. So if you guys have seen my booth at cons, you'll notice I have very crazy setups. And let's see, I do have about 15 minutes left on this panel, so I'm not sure I'm going to be able to get to everyone's questions. But if you do have questions, start putting it in the chat so I could jump on them right away, right after I'm done talking about this portion. So one theory I came up with doing cons for a lot of years, I came up with something called maximizing visibility versus maximizing area filled. So what do I mean by this? So when I say maximizing visibility, it means you're building for a booth that's nice, neat, clean, and orderly. So normally these booths are minimalized and they focus on a few select items. When I say fielding for area filled, you're basically trying to cram as much in your booth as possible. So you have a bigger range of diverse items that are sure to attract people. And I basically say your booth should be a mix of these two, and it depends on what items you're selling. So, like I said, I studied human psychology at Johns Hopkins University. And one thing I learned about human psychology is we humans tend to like things that are orderly, and we like to avoid things that are chaotic. So our eyes are going to focus on something that are nicer and more orderly than something that is very, very chaotic. So for example, these are a group of art students from Towson University, Oldecon a few years ago. I met them. They're very, very nice. This was their very, very first time vending at a con. And you could tell that this was the first time vending at a con because their booth, they have very nice art, but you could see their booth is kind of messy. They have art prints hung up and they have everything all spread across the table. Now, the reason why new vendors have setups like this is because to see all the other vendors having displays of hung up art and art on tables. So they try to emulate it without realizing why a lot of these experienced vendors have the booth set up the way they do. Because of how they have everything structured, the human eye is not going to naturally want to flow and look at everything. It's going to glaze over and want to pass over how these things look. So what I started to do was look at how professionals vended at did it. So the big merchandise sellers at these conventions, how did they do it? So I'm using this example from same Oldecon. This is a booth in the exhibitor hall. You could see it looks messy, but as you get closer, you realize there is some type of order to this chaos. So, for example, they have the wall scrolls at the very, very top because wall scrolls take up a big area of space. Because of that, you could see them from a distance. Then as you move closer, you'll notice things like figurines and action figures. These are put at the eye level. This is stuff adults would like. So it's at eye level. Then you notice that they have plushies and stuff more at the kid level because the kids like these things. So it's at kid level. So when you start realizing you should start building for different eye levels and different visibilities, then you could start experimenting with how you want to do your booth. So in the early days of vending at cons, I filled my sketchbooks instead of drawings with diagrams of how I would want to have the booth set up. So I had a bunch of different ideas of how I wanted to set up the booth. And you can see this is one of the first early BronyCons I did where I tried to do the exact same structure. Wall scrolls at the top, which can be seen from distance, my tarot cards, which are my main things at eye level, and then things for kids to grab at the bottom level. When I started, badges were kind of new for me, so I tried to make use of things that would make the badges stand out. So this is what I was talking about, area field versus visibility. So for example, these badges took up kind of a lot of space, but because badges were kind of a new item I was trying to showcase, I had to sacrifice space for them, make sure they're visible. While buttons are not really my main item. They are what I call impulse buy items. These are things I put out by the checkout window. So when people, let's say they want to get a big purchase from me, they look down and they see a cute $1 button. They like, oh, let's add it to the order. So these are supposed to be small impulse items that are added to the order. For me, they're not my main item, but if they are, you're going to have to sacrifice it. So for example, look at all the badges I fit into one tiny little basket. And about half a square foot of space on my table, I have a bunch of badges, pins, and buttons. Right here, this artist is taking up half of her table for buttons and the lanyards. Now, this is where you're going to have to sacrifice visibility versus space. So because buttons are not my main item, I am willing to sacrifice visibility and save on space. So I compress the buttons into a smaller area. But because buttons are her main item, she has to sacrifice space for visibility. She needs to make sure all her buttons are nice, neat, and organized and visible to someone who's just passing by. Make sure that they could catch the eye, because if not, if they're all like this, no one's going to spend time digging for the buttons. if the item is your main item, you need to maximize visibility. If it's not your main item, maximize space. So, for example, Mary Mouse is an artist in the furry fandom. A lot of you guys know, because she's at the point where people know her for badges. She is the default artist for badges. She can actually have all her badges displayed on one tiny little sheet like this. It's not the full-size badges, but you know exactly what you're getting from her. So she doesn't have, so she could save on visibility like that. So once you get known for certain items, you can start saving on space because those people will know you for these certain things. So for example, in comparison, people know me for tarot cards, but initially they didn't know me for badges when I started out in the furry fandom. Because of that, I had to make my badges take up a lot more space. So all the badges that Mary Mouse has on this takes up a very low amount of space, but because people know her for badges, she could do that. I have to take the space to fill out these badges because people didn't know me for badges initially, so I had to make people aware. This is my booth from BronyCon last year. You can see the same thing for the badges. And so yeah, beforehand, so these are some of my early attempts at booths. I tried to make mock-ups beforehand, so it's easier. So I had a guide to go on when I started setting up at booths at cons, so I didn't have to rush last minute. So that's something you could do. It's just start trying to make your own setups, practice. Here's one of my other BronyCon booths I had, where I was trying to maximize this thing. Play around with different color combinations. So these are some early examples of me trying to figure out different ways to attract people to the booth. You'll notice some vendors have very large signs. This is something that could be seen from a distance. So when you enter something like a vendor hall, a convention center, your eyes are going to try to rise over the mass of chaotic booths, and the signs that stick up are going to cause a lot of attention. So, for example, this artist makes use of her art in the colors of the sign and then the table pattern. Here's another artist I saw at MFF that also makes use of her art in the tablecloth. And you'll notice that too. So for example, a lot of convention centers will give you a default tablecloth and backdrop. But if you can make your tablecloth and backdrop have your own custom one that makes you stand out, it's going to attract a lot more people to your booth. So for example, this is a small anime con in Austin, and it was in the basement of a hotel. Their booth stands out because dark, cute and deadly, because they have very, very cute high pastel. Tasty Peach Studios. This is a booth that you see a lot of anime cons. They sell wigs and cute plushies. I took this picture through a crowd, and you could still see their booth from the distance because of the colors that they used for this. So this was their booth at a anime con in a hotel. This was their booth at an anime con in a convention center. So once you have a structure that's kind of that works for you, you can really make use of that. So for example, this was my booth at BronyCon last year in the Baltimore Convention Center, because I had a very large space. I could expand and make as much use as possible of my table space. So I had things that are nice and orderly and things that are also easy to pick up. Yeah, and look, I had this giant crowd. So and at the end of the day, even though everything's nice and orderly, crowds are going to come by and everything's going to be hopefully sold out. But yeah, so this was my booth at BronyCon, so I was able to make it work for me because I had a large space. And then the next week later at Megaplex, so I did Megaplex and BronyCon back to back. I had one very, very small table, and Megaplex is it's kind of interesting as opposed to different dealers then at other cons. Most cons have dealer halls that have spacing between the table. Megaplex, you can see, doesn't have spacing between the table because there's no spacing. I basically had to build back to back. In fact, if you look at the front of my Megaplex booth, I have no window. I actually had to poke my head out from the side to talk to people because I had no space to communicate and chat with people. So what worked for me at BronyCon, because I had the space, I had to really, really condense at a one table event. So going from like 6 tables to 1 table, you have to really learn how to adjust. And because of that, I had to like shrink a lot of my things down to small signs and focus on the main items that really worked for me. All right. Okay. It looks like I have about 5 minutes left. So I'm going to quickly just say that there's a lot of things you could do for taxes. So I would recommend hiring a tax accountant. They're able to help you with these things. Make sure to know that you could take deductible expenses from food, for example. Your hotel is also deductible. Your travel is deductible. Any product that's sold, the material costs that it took to make them receipt deductible. So, for example, if you buy a bunch of fabric and you made a fursuit, you can deduct the cost of the material cost to the fabric to make that fursuit from your taxes. However, you can't buy a bunch of fabric and the fursuit doesn't sell. You cannot deduct the cost until the item's sold. So, for example, if you want to make pins, you can order 100 pins, but you can't deduct the cost of the pins until you sell all those 100 pins, or you can only deduct how many pins sold. So if only 50 pins sold, you can only deduct 50% of the cost. I recommend, don't worry about keeping receipts for food or gas. Basically do what's called a per diem. There's a standard default that most states have when it comes to deducting the cost of food and gas. So do that instead. It saves you a lot of time worrying to save receipts. And with that, I'm going to try to answer as many questions as possible before my time is up. Thank you guys for coming to this panel. If you guys want to follow me, I'll be doing my convention history panel in about an hour afterwards in this same con. Let me post my social media down here. You can follow me on Twitter at TransformArtiv and more CirCon History. I have a temporary con store open right now. It's at my Con History website /shop. Just be sure to check that out. And if you want to see more of my panels as I get them done and uploaded, I'm turning a lot of my panels into video essays. Be sure to check them out on YouTube at TransformArtiv. And with that, let me see if I could take any questions. I see you guys have left some questions in your panel. If you guys have any questions, I'm going to just start them in right now, and I'm going to try to answer them as much as possible before my time is up. And let me see. Let me see which one of the questions is. Yeah, I don't normally sell stuff. So that was one of the things. It might have bit me in the foot, but it helped me the first few years I was doing this. I don't have an online store initially. So by making myself available only at con, it made me more exclusive to be at cons, because if you are a vendor, most people grab your business cards that, oh, I'll buy from you later online, and they never end up buying from you online. So for me, to save on worry about running a con and stuff, I ended up not doing that. So I was able to make more at con sales, but because of what's happening right now, I'm not able to sell at con. So I have to shift to an online store. So that's what most people are doing. Let's see. What else? Oh, yes. So you said if you don't have any products, should I start with an artist alley? Yes. So especially for furry cons, I will recommend you start out at an artist alley. Like I said, if all you want to do is just do on-site commissions, furry con artist alleys are the very, very best for that. And even at that case, I wouldn't say don't even worry about artist alleys for anime cons or so basically an artist alley at a comic con or a anime con is essentially a dealer's booth at a furry con. So again, don't make sure you don't confuse those terms. A furry con artist alley is very, very different than a comic con artist alley, which is very, very different than an anime con artist alley. But yes, if you don't have much stuff, I would say furry con artist alleys are the best place to get started. You don't have to pay. Most of them offer their tables for free. All you have to do is be entered into a lottery, and at most they only cost like $10 to $15 a day. Okay, another question. If I was only able to go to a dealer's den for a few hours a day, could I borrow half a table with someone? Would it be okay for me not to be dealer's den for entire con? Yeah, so for example, now I do, since I do a lot of cons where I'm also a guest and a panelist, I'm sometimes not able at my booth a lot. If you have a friend who's able to do sales for you, that's great. But sometimes a lot of people want to see the artist, and if I'm not there, it kind of makes them sad because they might want to get an autograph or something from me. So try to make yourself available at your booth at all times. If not, it's very, very good to partner with another dealer who can help you make sales for you when you're away or have friends to help you out. Yep, and with that, it looks like my time is done. So thank you very much for coming to my panel. If you guys have any questions, feel free to message me. My Telegram is just simply Choco Pony. You guys can send me questions there. With that, thank you very much. I'll be doing my con history panel at, I think, 9:30 tonight. So be sure to check that out.